Wow, wow, wow. I never thought I would be making an episode saying that the Nuggets have fired Mike Malone. That is crazy to even think about. Um, so many questions to answer, so many things to like think about, so many things to consider when it comes to this. And I want to get right into it, man. I have a slew of questions, like I'm sure you do too, or things running through your head as a basketball fan, as a person that may have a basketball podcast yourself, as a person that just enjoys the game, a Nuggets fan, whatever. Like I'm sure this is a lot to process, man. So I want to go ahead and get right into it because if I don't have this structure and outline of the show, I'm going to start rambling, right? Because this is just something that was hard to believe. And so I want to get right into it, man, and start breaking this down. So I'm going to get right to question one, um, so we can start talking about this. Let's go. And I've been before I actually get into the questions. I actually have been thinking like, what is leading to front offices and owners making such drastic and what seems like on the outside looking in hasty decisions? Is it that much of an urge to win now? Are you Because in my mind, you could say you were in win now mode, right? You in championship contention mode, but you had to look at this team and see that even with Malone, even with those guys, even if it wasn't any rumblings about you not getting along with the GM and all, I mean, and all of those things, whatever, you had to see that team and know that they weren't like championship ready, right? You had to know that when you letting certain dudes walk out of the door, they weren't championship ready, right? You had to know that. And it makes me question, like, why is everybody so quick to just let coaches go and fire people that brought success to the franchise, more success than they've had ever? We're talking about Michael Malone being the winningest coach in Nuggets history, one of the best coaches in the league, one of the best coaches in the NBA, period, ever, right? He brought the first championship to Denver. Denver net, come on, man. Nobody's ever talking about Denver being a championship team. You know what I'm saying? And he brought that to them. And so I would say it started with when the Bucks did Adrian Griffin like that, when he had won 30 something games in the first, stretch of the season, and you brought in Doc Rivers. I would say that is what kind of started this hasty type of thing, or this uncomfortable movement that people are making where they kind of just jump and fire people. Because usually it is one thing to fire a coach that has won a ring. For instance, the Lakers fired Frank Vogel 2 years later after he won his ring in 2020 with us. Um, I think the Bucks fired Budenholzer. What was that? 2 years later or a year later after he won a ring with the Bucks. Um, Dwayne Casey got fired that year from the Raptors after he won Coach of the Year. So like I've seen stuff like that, and that was crazy to me. That's crazy to me. But this is a whole different type of crazy. And I feel like a move like what the Bucks did with Adrian Griffin started that. In most recent, what Memphis did with Taylor Jenkins, showed people that nobody is safe. Nico Harris trading Luca, nobody is safe. Rumblings of Ja Morant being on the move, nobody is safe. Suns finna trade Kevin Durant, nobody is safe. So there's this trend going on in the league. And it brings us to the first question. Has the NBA become too obsessed with quick fixes and copycat moves? I do. I think I understand that as a businessman, as an owner, spending all that money, paying all those people, having so much overhead, so much, that you have to, do. I get wanting to put your team in a position to win. I'm not arguing that, right? But at the same time, I think some people are so busy GM wise and owner wise looking at other people's organizations, and they're trying to be overly innovative, overly strategic, overly, right, like make a move when you didn't even have to do that. Like for instance, a great example of somebody that's overdoing it, that overdid it, and has ruined their franchise for the time being. The Suns, they overcorrected. I get getting the old owner out of there because he was racist or whatever the case may be, and you get Matt Ishbia in there and all of those things. I get that. But I feel like you go from a team that was literally just in the finals playing against Giannis 3 years ago, and you overcorrected so much because you heard a big name like Kevin Durant that you traded away all your valuable pieces. You traded away Mikal Bridges, you traded away Cam Johnson, you trade away DeAndre Ayton, you get rid of Chris Paul, the leader of the team, right? Because you're trying to overly correct. You're trying to follow a trend so much that it pushes you in the wrong direction when instead of actually propelling you forward where you're trying to go. And I feel like that's what a lot of these teams and these organizations are starting to do in the league. They're so busy watching what the Bucks did with Adrian Griffin. They're watching what Memphis is doing with the Grizzlies. You know, getting rid of Jenkins. You're watching how you getting rid of dudes after one season, like the Suns did Frank Vogel. You're watching all of these things. You're watching Luka get traded in the middle of the season out of nowhere, and it's like, do we need to make a big move? And I think the answer is that some people may need to make a move, but some of the teams don't need to make a move. And I think the Denver Nuggets were one of those teams that did not need to fire Michael Malone. I get, you know, there being again rumblings of, you know, him losing the locker room, him having problems with the GM, which brings us to the next question of, was this firing more about just wins and losses? Was it internal tension? Was it player relationships? I think it was a combination of things. I think, let's look at it. The Nuggets were on a 4-game losing streak. Even that 8-game winning streak they had after All-Star break was a fluke to me. I mean, look who they played. They were playing nobody, right? Literally the Jazz and the Wizards. They were playing like nobodies, right? But you go on a 4-game losing streak. You lose terrible fashion in a great game against the Wolves. That was a terrible loss. You lose to Portland, right? You losing to people that you just normally shouldn't. And then the thing is, Jokic is putting up crazy numbers in these games, and you're still losing. Yeah, true enough, you didn't have Jamal Murray in these last 4 games that you lost, but still, I don't think some of those games you should have lost. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, it was player attention because they're again watching NBA today or listening to some very credible sources, just being studious of what's going on. There were rumblings that he was kind of losing that locker room. He yells so much and he cuss so much and he holds people accountable so much. He's so blatantly honest, like he always has been in interviews, and he'll call you out in an interview. He'll call you out. He'll say this, this person didn't do this, or like he said it a couple weeks ago after they lost to Portland. People don't watch film. People don't hold themselves accountable. People are full of shit on the team. He's saying that about his own players. So if you're doing that, that is eventually going to make another grown man be like, all right, bro, you overly doing it. And they probably started to feel that. His voice started to probably become stale after hearing it so much being yelled at and all of the other things. Like, all right, bro, I'm over it. I'm tired of hearing you. And then last but not least, again, having this bumping heads with the GM, I forgot his name that fast, right? You having bumpings with the GM, and now it's like, where do we go from here? And I get actually him having run-ins with the GM and not agreeing with some of the moves he makes as the manager of that team. Because why did you get rid of KCP? Why did you get rid of Bruce Brown? Why did you let Jeff Green walk out the door, a seasoned vet that you need to win a ring? Why did you let some of these dudes that you just needed walk out the door like it didn't matter? Now I get it. Denver is known to be a team that's not going to overextend themselves and overspend and do all of the things to keep a team together. I get that. But at the same time, when you have proven pieces in your band that show you that they contribute to winning basketball, you talking about you trying to win and keep a winning culture. Why do you keep letting them dudes walk out the door? And then the coach is telling you, man, I need KCP. Keep KCP. Because you let him walk out the door. Because you don't want to pay him his money. I get not being able to keep all of these dudes. But I'll be pissed too. But basically what the owners were saying is like, all right, y'all got rumblings, y'all got this cold shoulder towards each other, y'all talking shit about each other, y'all don't like each other. I'm gonna let both y'all ass go. I'm gonna let both y'all ass go. That's cold. That's cold. And it seems like they just didn't want to pick a side with either person. The owners didn't, the Nuggets organization didn't. So they just did it the whole thing. And it got people so confused. You know what I'm saying? And so when you talk about what was the real reason, I think it was a combination of the three. I think it was losing games that they felt like they shouldn't have been losing, in the playoffs being such a tight race. One game you can go from 2 to 5. right? If you lose, and then if you lose multiple games, we watched it. Memphis went from 2 to 8. That's how crazy it is. So I get that. I get the rumblings with the GM. I get not being on the same page. I get his voice going still. I still don't agree that's the way to go about it. That's just me. That's just me. And again, I think that so many people are so trying to be overly innovative and overly creative and overly strategic with their planning when it comes to this team, to their teams, that sometimes you can overcorrect. And that's what I feel like it may end up happening here. And then again, we may look up in a month and David Adelman, the interim head coach, may come in and give this team new life, and they may look like a completely different team. You may get Jamal Murray back, and you get David Adelman getting them going, a new voice, fresh ideas, and then be a whole different team. That may be the case, but right now it looks a little hasty. It looks a little questionable, and it looks a little quick triggered, if you will. Take us to the next question, man, because now you got to think about back to the Lakers. How does this impact the Lakers, right? Because that's what this platform is all built around. How does this impact the Western Conference? To me personally, I already felt like the Lakers could beat the Nuggets, right, in a 7-game series. I personally feel that, even with Michael Malone, even before all this happened. But now this happening, I feel like opens up the Western Conference so much more. Because if you think about it, Clippers, we can beat them, right? Nuggets, we can beat them. Minnesota, we can beat them. Houston, we can beat them. They're good, but we can beat them. Golden State, it'll be tough, but we can beat them. OKC, that'll be tough, but we can beat them. The West is wide open. So what I think it does, and then the Nuggets have some tough games coming up these last 3 games of the season. If I'm not mistaken, I think they have Houston. Let me double check before I misspeak. But I think they have Houston coming up. You have the Kings coming up, and then you have the Grizzlies. All teams, 2 of these 3 teams that are trying to solidify a solid spot in the playoffs. Kings trying to, I think, gonna end up being in the play-in, and then you got the Rockets, who are just one of the top teams in the West. Come on now, it ain't finna get no easier. So obviously, I'm going to say a team like the Lakers is going to benefit from Denver doing what they've done, and them being on this 4-game losing streak, and potentially could lose 2 of the last 3, if not all 3. But outside of the Lakers, what are some other teams that I feel like could be impacted in a positive way from this happening? I think a team like the Clippers. I think Golden State is in a prime place to move on up the ladder. I think Minnesota is in a prime place to move up the ladder. When you talk about 3 teams that are trending in the right direction, that are doing some great things and playing winning basketball and are right on your ass, those are the 3 teams aside the Lakers. When the Lakers are actually in position to take the number 2 seed, especially if Houston loses a couple games. Those are some teams I feel like you got to watch out for when it talks about what could continue to shake up the Western Conference and what could potentially happen with this firing of Michael Malone and now this sense of instability that's in Denver. That's crazy. Crazy, man. Crazy, 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 crazy. And it kind of brings you to your next question. Is Jokic the next superstar that could potentially ask out? I say it quietly, but is he the potential? And it's quietly because that's more of his demeanor. I'm not gonna lie to you. I never saw Jokic leaving the Nuggets. He seems like a Tim Duncan type of guy, Dirk Nowitzki type of guy, Kobe type of guy that stays one place for the rest of his life, his whole career. He doesn't seem like a guy that bounces around. He seems like a guy that whether we suck or whether we on top of the world, I'm here. I think he wants to win, but I think he's the type of guy that sticks through the trenches with you, right? Because the Nuggets, they weren't very good for a while, and he never wavered, right? And so I wouldn't be surprised if he asked out, especially if he feels that there's this feeling of instability in the organization. If he feels like they have no clear plan and direction of where they want to go, if they have no plan to bring in reinforcements and get him some help in the areas on the court that they need help, and also get him a coach that knows how to coach him. You see what I'm saying? So I wouldn't be surprised if he asked out. But then again, I've never seen Jokic being the type of guy that you know leaves from the one franchise that drafted him, the one franchise that took a chance on him, that came down to him, them choosing between him and not Vucevic, but Nurkic, and they chose right. You see what I'm saying? So I don't see him leaving, but I wouldn't be surprised if he left. Now we talk about teams that he can end up going. Of course, you've been hearing rumblings of him potentially wanting to go to LA with Luca. You've been hearing rumblings of him potentially wanting to go to a place like OKC or something like that. Now, if he goes somewhere like that and you put him with a guy like Shea and you give up Chet, now I'm afraid of OKC on a different level because that is what they missing, a dominant force on the inside. I just don't think Chet is that. I think he's good, but I don't think he's that. You know what I'm saying? And so that's scary. That's scary. Now, what about some of the others? I think Jamal Murray's contract is getting ready to kick in this summer. Could you potentially move him and get off a lot of that money you owe him and bring in some pieces? Do you get rid of Michael Porter Jr.? I would, right? I think the only two pieces I would be hesitant to let go of or not letting go of would be Jokic, Aaron Gordon, and if possible, Murray. But Murray on the table too for the right piece. Murray's on the table too for the right piece. And it's so funny, man. When they talked about him potentially going to play with Luca, um, it was like a proposed trade of like Austin Reeves, Rui. I think it was like maybe like Austin Reeves, Rui, Vendo. Both of our first round picks, our pick swap, and it was like, would you do that trade? And I'm like, well, him and Luca, you assuming that maybe LeBron is still back for one more year. But if you get rid of all those other pieces, where your depth? And do you have any ask? I think it was I think actually it was Dorian Finney-Smith is who it was the other person. Where's your depth? Do you have any other pieces where you can go make another move to bring in other depth? Or are you kind of like hoping and praying on this duo or potential trio to be enough to take you to the promised land? I don't know. I don't know. I feel like that may be one of those things where you overreact and overcorrect too. If I'm being honest, I don't know if that's moving the needle for me. And then again, I'm like, is this more of like a fan base thing, a wish and a want and a hope and a prayer, or is this something that could potentially happen? I think we've seen crazy things happen in the NBA. It would be crazy. I think it'll break the internet, but I wouldn't be surprised. But I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it and what that looks like. You see what I'm saying? But the main point here is that I feel like this has become a copycat league. I feel like GMs and owners are starting to become very antsy and hasty and just doing stuff. Um, Everybody seems to be in like win now mode, even though only one person can win, and people have to be realistic about if they're even the person that can win. And then last but not least, let's ask the question, the elephant in the room. Where will Malone end up coaching next? Because we know he's gonna get a call. Great coaches are so rare. Well, established great coaches anyway. There's a lot of dudes on the come up out there that are great coaches that just haven't been given a chance yet. But where would he go? Maybe to Washington? Maybe to Charlotte just got a new guy. Um, what's some of these other struggling franchises? Y'all help me out. Maybe to Utah? Will Hardy's a great coach though. Maybe to Chicago. Lee Donovan? Get him out of there? New York? You know where I really want to see him at though? I can see him going to be over there in San Antonio and coaching up Wimby. He's shown that he know how to coach up and improve a dominant big. You got an ultimate prime, all-star caliber point guard in De'Aaron Fox, just like you had with Murray. You got the wings, you got the depth, you got the talent. Ain't no telling what they're gonna draft in this upcoming year. I could see him being a successor for Pop. And Pop probably need to sit his ass down anyway. If anything, just gonna be in the front office and take a little stress off yourself from being on that sideline and doing all that traveling and shit. You old as shit, and let somebody else step in and coach for you. And who better to do it than Mike Malone, a proven coach that just won a championship not even 3 years ago. NBA is crazy, man. NBA is crazy. Was not expecting that headline to come out today, but it was crazy, man. And I just want to come on here and talk about it a little bit with y'all and see what y'all thought about it. I love y'all so much, man. And until next time, this concludes the episode of Skybox Conversations. I'll see y'all later. Peace.